Welcome forward to the Jet Propulsion Lyric Podcast. And today we sitting with Mr. Darkness, Eclipse.
Oh, what's happening?
Tell him who you is, man.
Oh, I go by the name, many names.
Okay.
I'm like Dracula. I got many names that I go by. You know, the federal given name is Mr. Terry Hollins. Also gone by Big T, Big Terry, Big E, Eclipse, EAMD, whole bunch of different names that I don't like, so I won't mention them. But you know, I'm out there like that.
So you know, on here we talk about Chicago hip hop in general, and how you know we came in contact with it and everything. So you know we wanna start there.
Oh yeah, well you know my first encounter with you, I mean man, you know down at that radio station in Hyde Park.
But I mean, when you first heard hip hop,
oh my first hip hop,
yeah,
I can tell you, I can go to it.
All right,
1979 Christmas holidays. You know, back then we were celebrating Christmas. That's how a lot of black families came up. So, you know, no knock on it. But 1979, there were two songs.
Okay.
I mean, of course, Rapper's Delight, and then you know, Curtis Blow, the Christmas song.
Yes.
And you know, Rapper's Delight gets the credit for being the first one. And if I'm not mistaken, and you could correct me. I think they released sometime like around September, October, and the Christmas song released like November that same year, 1979. And the reason why I remember it because I remember my mom used to host holiday parties, so we would have the family friends over, and I just remember distinctly. You know, I could say Rapper's Delight was the first rap song I remember hearing. Well, the first, what we call, I guess, if we call it a commercial release, because I mean, as you grow older, you know, when you know, Blowfly was doing it, right. You know, Dolomite was doing it, you know, a whole lot of other people, were doing what we call rap. But Rapper's Delight was that first song, but it took me, but it was still that Curtis Blow Christmas song because, of course, back then, Christmas, you know, as a 6, 7, 8-year-old, it was everything. You hear somebody rapping about, you know, what you doing, you know, the family gathering. So that was my introduction into the whole rap game and understanding at least what it was. And even back then, I didn't know what it was. It was just a vibe.
And it just caught you.
It just caught me. Yeah. It was just that whole vibe. And that's what I remember hip hop or rap. Let me say that. That's what I remember rap being as a kid. All that, you know, all the stuff that came after that, you know, I remember it being just something that definitely not wholesome, but something that just gave you a good vibe, a party atmosphere, and that, you know, with gathering. So that's why I love to see it sometimes.
So what area of Chicago you was coming up in?
Altgeld Gardens on the far, far, far south side of Chicago. Some call it the Wild Hunnets, some call it the Alligator, but it was Altgeld Gardens for me.
So actually, as I've been doing this, I found out like a lot of the Chicago forefathers, mothers in the Chicago gang came up out of the Altgeld Gardens.
Yeah, there were a few. And the crazy part, and forgive me for cutting you off, there was one group, and I've still not found their name. They were they were old. Of course, they were a little bit older than us. And this is going back to probably like 83, 84.
Okay.
They were making their rounds around the city. They were making noise. There was a show called, and Oprah took it over. I think it was called Chicago. I can't remember that show. Oprah's first AM Chicago.
AM Chicago, yeah.
And they were on that show. Okay. And it was like, you see cats that you see around the way doing that. So it was like, okay, I'm digging that. I'm digging that.
So we're talking early 80s, right?
Yeah, I would say 82, probably more like 81, 82, 83, that whole time. You know, of course, me being a real young kid, I can't put a stamp to the actual year.
Right.
But I know it had to be around that 81, 82, 83 time.
Yeah, because I think, man, you around the same, in the same age group, right?
Yeah.
So, like in 83, 82, 83, 84... people were starting to form, the crews.
Oh, yeah.
DJ crews, because, you had the house music. But also then you had the version of hip-hop scene.
Right.
So, in the Gardens, I'm quite sure that a lot of these crews start to pop up around then.
There was
8th grade, 8th grade.
The one that I remember in particular, it was my man Rod Tucker, Ruthless Rob and the 12 Gauge Posse. It was him, Dollar Bill, DJ Fella. I know Dollar Bill is in Memphis doing his thing on Memphis radio.
Okay.
Rod is still doing. He's actually transitioned. He's doing film now.
Oh wow.
And Fella, he's a Mr. America bodybuilder, but he's still DJing. So it's like you fast forward from that time to now, 35, 40 years, and cats are still living their dream. They still living out their dream and doing what they came into it doing. They just expanded and doing a little bit more.
So in the early 80s, you seeing these cats starting to form and putting things together.
Oh, yeah.
The crews together. And what did you fit in there?
What I fit in? Well, let me mention one more crew. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Pooh, Wolfie, Pooh, Wolfie, and Moon. To me, I think they were some of the first cats that I know that was signed. And this is going back to high school. This is like, I would say 85, 86, around that time. These were some of the first cats that I know that was signed to record labels.
Right, because we'll talk about Pooh and Dollar Bill in a minute.
For sure.
Because they did some things later on down in the timeline.
Okay.
There were, but did you want the DJ? Did you want the pop? Did you want to?
Well, it's funny you say that because my first passion was DJing.
Okay.
Because I would show up at the parties out, in Altgeld. There were a whole lot of things going on. You had the gym, what we call a gym show.
Okay.
That was at the community building. You had skating parties that went on at the Catholic. You had Screaming Wheels out in Gary, Indiana. Okay. You had a few different things. So I always gravitated to the DJ because the DJ was making everybody move. So my first love was DJing. That's why I still to this day I invest and I do it. I've never called myself a DJ because it was just a passion. It was a hobby, so I did that.
Okay.
But in terms of rap, I would say me and my man, and I gotta mention him, Johnny Banks. God rest his soul. That was my best friend from probably, since we were like in kindergarten.
Okay.
All the way up to high school, where we we kind of branched off because I was doing my sports thing and he was doing his thing. But we were back at we went to Catholic school.
Okay.
So, but we weren't Catholic. So let me just say that we were bad kids. That was going to Catholic school was our parents' way of getting us out of the troubles of public school.
Right.
So we were still who we were, but we got our education right. So me and my man Johnny Banks, we and back then we weren't writing nothing. Everything we thought we was just the coldest freestyler. We would walk around, we freestyle, we just coming off the head, and of course us being a duo, who we gravitate to, Run DMC.
Right.
So we walking around, I'm the king of rock. There is none higher. So that's where we at with it. So me and him, we formed a little, a little group called Devastation Incorporated.
Okay.
Devastation Incorporated came from, we were both wrestling fans. Devastation Incorporated were the Road Warriors.
Okay.
So that was one of their tags. They went by the Road Warriors, Devastation Incorporated, the Legion of Doom, who, Red Man, they went to the Legion of Doom part. We took the Devastation Incorporated. So that's what we did. We'd be around, and in the gardens, you had what was called the green machines.
Okay.
You had the barrels, you had the blacktop, you had the rocket. So kids, we would just find a place, we'd go there, and kids would just be doing stuff. I wouldn't even call it battling. We would just call ourselves, exactly, showcasing. The battle part didn't come until it was crazy, and this is how things come full circle. My man, another one of my brothers who's passed, Andre Atkins, a.k.a. Biscuit, a.k.a. Ricketts, all that, Dre Battle. He brought my man, Doc Maninoff, to Block 4. To battle me, and that was the first time I ever heard somebody battle. He was like, he want to rap against you. And me, I'm like this modest kid. I'm like, I can do it. But that was the first time I was challenged, and I was like,
wait a minute. You and Doc Maninoff, that's your first battle?
First time. It had to be. I guarantee you, he don't, once he hears this, he'll remember it.
Okay.
If he can recall it. I just recall it because my man, like I say, Dre, they were both block. What we call in the gardens, you went by blocks.
Okay.
Block 1, block 2, block 3, block 4, and so on.
That's how it was set up.
That's how it was set up. So I was in block 1, him and Doc in block 1. I'm in block 4. They in block 1.
Okay.
So me and Dre, he went to the Catholic with us, and he knew we, doing the little thing. So he brings Doc over there, and I didn't know about battling. Wow. I didn't know nothing about battling. So it was like he brought him over there. And mind you, Doc is a couple of years older. So that whole thing, he brought him over there. He's like, he want to battle you. And I'm like, battle didn't register in my head as something that we finna rap. I'm thinking we finna humbug or something like that. So it's like, no, I'm good. So I never spit anything. But that had me tune up what, my quote unquote, my game. Because I was like, if somebody, gonna come to me, I need to, be prepared for it.
Right, because, back then people would go and say, my boy know how to rap, and they'd go take them and it's a battle now. It's like,
But the crazy part about it, I don't know if Doc, but again, Doc is a little older. So I didn't know if he was coming over there knowing that he was coming over there to battle rap. Just like I didn't know that that was the whole thing. Man, Dre, I'm like, okay. But, it was never any beef. It wasn't like, man, you punk this. It was just like, oh, you don't want to rap. It was just like that.
Okay. Yeah, because now, it's a whole different thing.
Absolutely.
Now. So that gave you that drive to like, I got to tighten this up. I got to start getting more into
it was the catalyst.
Okay.
Because again, at that time, and a lot of kids, they were writing. I don't think I ever wrote anything until I was probably like in 8th grade in high school.
Okay.
I never wrote anything down and never remembered it after that. I was just, off the top, just spitting. I'm not saying that I was super tight with it, but I was decent enough that,
hey, I'm ready to go.
Exactly. And I stuck to that for a long time. I wouldn't rap because I never looked at it as, okay, I'm going out here and I'm going to dominate the world. It was for me as a kid and one of the first generations of hip hop and rap. It was just, okay, I see people doing. I didn't know that people wrote.
Right.
I didn't know they wrote that stuff. I thought, okay, I didn't know the intricacies of how people went and did an album, but I was just, emulating what they were doing. I didn't know that you write it down and you go back and you go, you tweak it and you do this and you do that. Something I didn't learn to, of course, many years later, but that's how we roll.
So after that, did they start bringing other people to, like?
No, because the one thing about it, there were a lot of cats out there that would do it. But I don't think we really in the well, for me, let me speak for me. I can't speak for everybody. There wasn't a whole lot of ciphers going on. It was cats that was doing stuff. Okay. But it wasn't a whole, you wouldn't walk up on a group of 10 cats just going in and out of it. I think people were doing what they were doing. And, you spit. If you had a party and you had the opportunity to do something, you do it. But it didn't, for me, and I'm just speaking for me, because a lot of people are like, man, it was, I'm speaking for me.
Okay.
Because of the way we roll. Because, again, and not to drift away from it too far, and you mentioned it earlier, this is still during the height of the house party age.
Right.
House music age.
So we're still in that era where hip-hop wasn't getting, the rap wasn't, it was Run DMC. Here you had the Houdini,
right?
You had Curtis Blow, Fat Boys at that time, Roxanne Shante,
right?
The Roxanne battles and stuff. But house music still dominated in Chicago,
right?
So how was that? Because you go into the house parties.
The crazy dynamic about that is if you listen to some of those old mixes, if you can recall some of those old mixes. It was hip hop.
Yeah.
It was progressive dance. And that's what cats were doing. That's what people were doing. They were doing those dance. It was still had that essence of the DJ party, that party motion, that thing, getting them hyped up. The DJ, the original MC, dictating what goes on. So that's why Chicago and hip hop. It was for us, or for me. Let me stop that. For me. It seemed like it was the same thing because when I recall and listen to a lot of that old house, it was hip hop.
Right. They used some of the same rhythms,
exactly.
The same parts of certain songs. They used the same, because that was interesting to me was that a lot of Chicago played a lot of the house music, but then Busy Bee came out with an album years later, the Suicide album, and I was listening to it and I'm like, wait a minute, we're listening to this in the house.
Yeah, exactly. That's why, and I hope I'm not jumping too far forward. That's why when New York and Chicago had that beef with the hip hop versus hip house thing, it was kind of crazy. It was stupid because it was like it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just that Chicago with the hip house was a couple of years behind New York with hip hop.
Right.
We were still on the rapping and make you dance, while New York was into the other stuff.
Right.
And I just used that because it could have been a bevy of things, but Chicago was still into the hip house part of it and making you dance and rapping over it. And it was like New York just surely did not respect that. And you all those albums, man. Cool Rock Steady on the MIC.
And we're gonna get into that too, because that plays a big part of, you know, how hip hop developed in Chicago.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And you know, we're gonna diverge into that because we still in those 80s where we're learning about parties now.
Right.
Because before, you know, in our hood we have somebody have a party in their house.
Man.
But then as we getting into the high school years, these clubs are popping up.
Yes, sir.
You know, around centered around the house music, basically. And because it wasn't no hip hop clubs,
right?
Because it was the hip hop.
Yep.
You know, going to Sawyer's, going to the
warehouse,
the box with Rob Hardy.
Yep, the box, Dejois,
La
Mirage. The spots on Ashland was 2 spots on Ashland. Goodness gracious.
Yes.
Goodness great. There were 2 spots on Ashland. I can't even remember.
But it was, and then like Mendel with the
Mendel.
And Hales, Mendel and Hales.
Mendel flat out was the dopest. But like you say, Hales and then Father Flager's school.
What, Saint Sabina?
Saint Sabina. They used to do party, but Mendel,
was the spot.
Mendel was the spot because it was in proximity to us. It was, you know, they going to Catholic school, they were recruiting us. So all the parties they would invite us to, and if you remember, the shorties were in the basement.
Because they had 3 levels, right?
Well, they used 2 levels, but I know that we were in the basement because we were the grammar school kids, and then the older high school kids were upstairs in the gym.
Okay.
So that's how it was with us, and it was like. It was everything. It was a free fall. I mean, you go from Prince to some Run DMC to some house, and it was like, you know, at that time you just thought it was normal.
Okay. So it's just, but how was it for people who didn't get to go to those parties? How was it going into a Mendel party and?
Well, let me preface it by saying this. I just went to the party. I wasn't dancing.
Okay.
You know, but it was the vibe. It was like it was the man.
Some people went there to dance. Some people wanted the music. Some people just want to be in the presence of the people. You know?
Right.
But I mean, for a lot of, I didn't go to the Mendel party, so I'm just trying to get a feel for how it was to.
it was the vibe was always dope because, you know, it was always a group of us from the guards that would go up there. And I mean, whether it was clicked up to protect yourself or whatever, we rolled in crews. We rolled in groups. And that's how, you know, that's how most neighborhood kids go. They go as a group. So we would go, it'd probably be about 20 or 30 of us. And you know, safe environment, cool environment, nobody's being tested. You just get in there and you party. And for those that want to party and dance, you had those. For me and a couple of other people, we stand around and we listen to the music. And man, enjoy ourselves. But all of it, I mean, all of it was just enjoying yourself. So everybody enjoyed it a different way. But the Mendel, man, for a kid, and I think we went to the first one. I was in 7th grade. So, I mean, that means I'm 13, maybe 12 or 13 at some point. So as a kid going to a party outside of the gardens, man, that was just dope because you in the midst of like a lot of kids from around the city.
And you seeing a whole different
culture. Absolutely.
You know, because, you know, I think that's one of the things that's really kind of missing now for the kids.
Yeah.
Is those type of parties where you could go in and party and not really have to be affiliated with this and affiliated with that and have a good time. You know, and we always talk about, man, you missed that era.
And you hit it because we didn't, you know, of course we came up in I don't like to use certain words, but gang infested. We grew up in neighborhoods that had gangs in it.
Had
street organizations. Yeah, street organizations. But when you went to parties like that, You wasn't checking to see if he was a Vice Lord, if he was a Stone, or if he was Folks.
'Cause there's all in that party in there.
Exactly, and that was the whole thing, and that is that era. People kill me because I stay stuck in that 80s vibe, and you probably see some of it. Like I'm 80s shoes, the Jordans, the fashion. You know, I love it. If you come down to my basement, and you will come down to my basement, I got Michael Jackson. I got what's the name of that movie? Goodness gracious, The Time Machine, Doc Brown, Back to the Future. I got my whole take, just like you got the swords, I got nunchucks. It's like the 80s for me, it was just a vibe, and it's like when I could lay eyes on it, it takes me back to that. And the same thing with 80s hip hop and 80s rap. When I see that, it's like it takes me back to a vibe that it's like I wish now, you know, the wish the if was how I go, if was a fifth, we'd all be drunk. Right. But man, imagine being an adult in an era that impacted you like that, where you could have more influence on it. Imagine that.
And that's and I think that's why we do go back as adults. Like, if I would have knew then, I would have been. But you going to these parties, did you gravitate over to where the DJ booth was at?
Absolutely. I mean, that was like, eventually that was like my stop. You work yourself around with the crew. Right. They'll start branching off. They'll go flirting with the girls. These cats will go dancing. These cats will go popping, because that was part of it too. They go popping, and then you have a corner with the cats on the floor doing the original footwork. Okay. You know, and then for me, it was the DJ, because it was like I wanted to understand what that was.
Yeah, because it was mysterious.
Exactly.
Because before, you know, on the radio, people play records on the radio. In the house, you see people put the records on the record player coming up in the 70s, listening to, you know, all that good music. But now you got this DJ in the corner scratching and blending and throwing it all together.
Man, and you trying to understand. And back then, again, we going back to the era where it wasn't slam mixing. It was blending, where cats blended a song.
And brought them in.
And it's on time. And it was like, the first time I ever got on turntables, of course, I stunk. I mean,
those wild horses were
right? Because I'm thinking, okay, it's easy. You just put it out there, you put it on there, you push the fade. They taught me how to push the fade up. Boom! It's what, and I found out it didn't work like that. It took an ear. It takes an ear to do that. And you know, it was like, man,
I'm gonna do this.
And that's where I was with it. I wanted to do that because, again, we going back to the 80s. The 80s, DJs for what they are now, like people who come on some of my job sites, they know my reservations with these current DJs and how I dislike some of them.
I'm sorry.
But I don't think the DJ gets the credit that he deserves sometimes because of the way they held down parties. Yeah. It's just when you fast forward to the 2000 and beyond DJ who thinks that they really doing something, and you have to remind them you're playing recorded music that somebody else put their blood, sweat, and tears into. So back up off of it a little bit. Yeah. But that 80s DJ who was really breaking somebody's music, who was really doing something innovative, you know, a lot of them don't get the credit that they deserve.
No, they don't.
They really don't.
And especially like, you know, like the neighborhood DJs who influenced us,
man,
to do this.
I could give you a list of them, and people hearing this, one of the first Black Knight, Bobo, from Altgeld Gardens. This was probably the first cat. For one, he had 1200s back in 83, 82. Probably had him before that. But Black Knight, he was doing the part. And a lot of the cats, they had the 1200s back then.
He was doing something then.
Man, Black Knight was the first cat with that. It's time, boy. I think that right there, bro. I to this day, I still, and I got a little bit of DJ skill. And yesterday I was in my basement doing some stuff. It's like, how? Because I'm aided with a mixer that can cue up back to that point. And it's like, how in the hell were they going back to, bro, the 80s DJ, that 90s DJ, anybody from that era, man, much love and respect to y'all. Because y'all, I mean, man, y'all are some of the dopest.
And see, that's the thing is that, like, I try to, you know, get across is that them DJs was tearing it up.
Man, killing. Absolutely killing.
You know, and it was crazy that, you know, those records, you know, they spinning it back and forth, and it's
man, Right, yeah, stuff that even as I in my old age try to emulate, it's like y'all were the innovators of this. Y'all were the first generation of cats that were doing this. Mind you, yeah, they figured it out. It was like, man, it's like they give credit, and I won't even mention it. They give credit to the first DJ that was scratching, but I think it's sometimes it's kind of like having thoughts. You can be on the other side of the planet and do the same thing, but somebody gets credit for it because they were the first person.
What are some of those DJs that influence you? If you can remember a few.
I just gave you Black Knight.
Okay.
Man, Geo, he's still doing his thing in Altgeld Gardens. Big up to the OG Geo. Okay. You talk about Mooney. You talk about, I'm going to get into some cats that was doing some house music. You talk about Sherman. You talk about Sprucci. My man Sean Smith from Golden Gates. And the cats that I just mentioned outside of Sean Smith, all from the Gardens. Sean Smith grew up in a community called Golden Gate, which was right across the street from Altgeld Gardens. He was putting it down. My man Hot Rod was doing it. Jed, Gino. And then, of course, I got to mention my man Chud.
Yes, indeed. We're going to talk about him in a minute. Because we're going to talk about him.
Oh, yeah, because I'm a few years older than this cat, but this cat is older than me in wisdom.
Yes, indeed.
So that bro.
We're going to do a whole little segment.
Oh, yeah.
But we actually were celebrating the Gardens then.
Absolutely.
We're celebrating the Gardens because, like I say, the Gardens had a big influence. As I've been doing this, I learned on Chicago hip-hop and world hip-hop, for a matter of fact. So we're going to celebrate the Gardens.
Yeah, it should be celebrated.
And, so we're going through 83, 84, 85. And then suddenly, 86 kind of brought in a change. Because then you had Slick Rick come in.
I remember that transition, that 85 to 86 transition. Yes, sir.
Right? So how did that, when you heard those songs coming in that era?
Well, that continued that whole party vibe. It went with the house music that was prevailing at the time. So you had, and you mentioned Slick Rick. You can't mention Slick Rick without Dougie Fresh. Dougie Fresh, they called him the greatest entertainer. World's greatest entertainer. And that's what he does. He's a true MC. Whether or not he's respected for his lyrics, he does what he does on the microphone to get people going.
He rocks the party.
Absolutely. And even what he does now, his whole show, I love how his show is now, and we jump forward now and I'm gonna go back to it. His show is based on just keeping the vibe going as an MC, because you have some of those MCs that stop a show, we're gonna slow it up and we're gonna do this. No, he keeps the vibe going and brings out the next artist. So if you've never saw that on the Tom Joyner cruise or any show that he's done, it's like the vibe is just so dope because it doesn't stop. When they say the quote unquote the party don't stop, it don't stop. It keeps going, and the way it just transition is dope. But I'm gonna jump back.
Wait, no. Okay. Sometimes we need, we overlook those party rockers.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So, but going back into listening to, these songs are starting to come in even stronger now. Mm-hmm. On the radio, you're hearing Salt and Pepper. I Take Your Man. What's the other one they had? A couple other songs they had. They was
from that time. You had Push It.
No, you had Push It. It was Push It. Showstopper. The Showstopper was the first one that we kind of was getting into.
Okay.
And then they had a couple of songs, but then you had Dougie Fresh and Slick Rick. Lottie Dottie was a huge hit. Houdini was transitioning. Was moving away from
underrated group, man.
Yeah, but they had Freaks Come Out at Night.
Yes, one of my favorites. I'm a hoe.
I'm a hoe.
I'm a hoe. Yeah. Friends. I mean, when you can run it like that, man, it's like a lot of those groups. Now we have a greater appreciation for them because back then it was about, and even now, well, no, I won't say now because that's a whole different animal. But up to the 90s, it was all about that beat and that dance and the ability or the want to dance. So a lot of us didn't pay attention to the lyrics. Mm-hmm. You listen to them now as a grown person, it's like, oh man, the word they use now, oh, he was spitting. And you listen to that and like, man, they were talking about this back then. It was like, man, they were some fortune tellers.
Right. And so how was you getting your music?
Well, the crazy part, the same way that we all got it back then. You got a sample and a taste of it on radio, but going to the weekend parties.
Okay, but did you go to the record shops?
I didn't go to a record shop until I was probably a sophomore in high school, and that's when I got some of my first DJ equipment, and I was going buying house music.
You was buying house
So
music?
I didn't buy my first probably until, what did I say? I said 86, so 87, 86. So it's the same time, because that's when I got my first NWA CD.
Okay.
Or not CD, cassette.
Okay.
My first Ghetto Boys cassette. My boy Buddha, bless him. You know, big shout out to him. He put me up on Ghetto Boys and the and NWA. So my first purchases were 97.
Okay.
I mean, and I said 97, 87.
So I'm learning that the Gardens is like basically the foundation to a lot of Chicago hip hop.
You're going to upset a lot of people, but I agree with you.
But hey, we could have a discussion about that. You know, ain't fist fight.
Right. No, I told you know what? I agree with you, and you know, of course, you got a bias. No, I don't have a bias. It's just what I saw and what I knew what was going on around the city.
And this is what I'm learning.
Right.
So you know that the Gardens has a strong. They got. Let's put it like this. From what I might be wrong. Don't quote me. But like 80% of this foundation laid is coming out of the Gardens.
I mean, the hip hop, yeah, because you had for one, again, going back to Black Knight leading the DJ revolution. That's one element of hip hop.
Right.
You had the Breakers, which again, I can't remember the names, but I say Johnny Bill. Johnny Bill was the first cat I ever in my life seen do a helicopter. This is before I ever seen it on TV. Of course, being a grown man, I understand where it came from. Yeah. But Johnny Bill was like one of the first. He was one of the first breakers. So that's another element of hip hop. You know, again, I mentioned the DJ. You mentioned the MCs. Yeah. Bro, I mean, again, going back to some of the first cats signed, we mentioned them before, and then the tagging. I mean, if you ever was in the Gardens in the '80s. You know, and again, they called it graffiti, but it was like, man, that was some dope tagging back then. It wasn't called tagging back then, or at least, you know, they didn't call it that. They called it vandalism. Right. They called it graffiti, but it was like some of the dopest came from out of that. Doc, one of them.
Right, Doc Mendenhall. We're gonna talk about him too, but also the freight trains came through there, right?
Absolutely.
So that was a canvas for the graffiti artists.
Yes.
And everybody who.
There was a rail yard. There was a rail yard. And it's Golden Gate. It's called Golden Gate. That's where the freight train would come and it would stop. It was a whole lot more going on there. But I don't feel like being in. Yeah, we ain't gonna talk about that. But those trains would stop there, and that's where a lot of cats would get their tagging on. So if you saw trains, if you see some of those old trains, a lot of that art came from the G. It came from the cats in Golden Gate and Eden Green.
Okay. So, but you know, we that area. What I'm trying to get across to people who listening to this, that area bred a lot of talent.
Absolutely.
You know, that branched out and went other places, and they even touched cats and the ladies, you know, who decided to work in this art form.
Yes.
You know, they inspired them.
Yes.
You know, they went further, you know, brought it further south. Well, north.
North, yeah.
You know.
Because we already as far south as you can go in the city of Chicago.
So but also they touched Gary and surrounding
Oh, indeed.
areas.
Yes.
You know, and my thing is that, you know, we tend to forget because we get in our little cubby holes and thinking that, you know, we discovered this over here, we discovered this over there, but this is a phenomena, you know. And the way I look at it is that as I'm learning, you know, that we're talent. There was a lot of talent coming and branching out, and so as we listen to these records, what made you gravitate towards hip hop a little bit more?
Those voices, those raps. It's just, again, back to me and my man Johnny Banks. the direct influence from Run DMC. Me and him being a duo, they had a DJ, we didn't. And it was that back and forth. It was like that was so commanding. It was ridiculous because you didn't know that was. I hate to use the word stage, but it was choreographed. Let me use that. The timing, exactly. And it was like when you Run DMC come out, I am the king of rock. There is none higher. Sucker MCs was called me sire. To burn my kingdom, you must use fire. It's like that back and forth was like you can't come on.
So not to cut you off, but Run DMC was the tightest with the timing.
Absolutely.
And that's what drew me to them was that timing.
Yes.
Because he finished that word, DMC was right there.
Yes.
DMC finished the word, Run's there, and Jay brought it all.
Man.
And I think that's what influenced a lot of the cats early on was that timing of
Absolutely. That's why in the pantheon of MC group MCs.
Mm-hmm.
They don't get the respect that they get. We give them the respect, but when you look at it, when a couple of years ago, and don't knock on these cats, when they talked about the Migos being the greatest rap group ever, it's like, did you pay attention to anything that came prior to them?
Right.
And that's where it's like, even with I'm branching off, but even with this Michael LeBron, debate, who's the GOAT? Right. If you didn't compete in like eras. Mm-hmm. Let's leave that alone. Just say your era, this is the greatest. That era, he was the greatest. Don't try and make it where if you put them in the same era, because what people don't realize is the adaptability that has to be placed. Yeah. If you put Migos in a MC based, environment and era, do they survive? No. Or do they adapt? The same way if you put Run DMC in this mumble rap, fast paced, do they adapt or do they fail? That's why those comparisons don't always work. Just love the music for what it is.
And you gotta love it, but unfortunately we live in this society where like they like the comparison and compete. We like competition because we MCs, we human, we like that. We like to compete. We're gonna talk about some of the fields you competed on. I'm trying to keep this short, but now I'm realizing,
man, I got time. If you got time,
we got a lot to cover because you the Renaissance man.
I like that.
Renaissance man,
and that's born of something that a young brother, far older in wisdom than he is in age, imparted on me. When you mention the Renaissance name, but we'll get to that when you're ready to get into it. A term that I hate is you need to dummy it down for people. No, I need to educate them on this. I hate that term, dummying down something for people, because if and I hate to use this word also, the educated version of something, why am I dummying something down when I adapted and when I adjusted and when I took the time to understand? Yeah, it's like, no, we gonna comprehend. Oh my goodness!
and to go into that, like with social media, the comprehension level of people has dropped off, and that's why people are getting into these social media beefs because their comprehension levels is not up. They don't understand context. They don't understand satire, humor.
You want to know why? Because social media adapted the Arthur's Law philosophy that put newspapers set it at the third grade level for adult people. No, that's not how you do things.
But we came out of, at least for me, I came out of that era of where teachers would smack your knuckles if you pronounced the word wrong.
Well, let's talk about 1980 when corporal punishment was abolished.
But I'm saying that even people, they made it. A lot of these women teachers and the black men teachers in these schools at that time made it a point that you're gonna learn how to read. You're gonna know some arithmetic. You're gonna know spelling. I know nowadays, you can get on social media. We use slang and we use chopped up words to express ourselves. But at the same time, you also have to know how to the meaning of words,
Exactly.
where to go, and I know we getting.
No, that's part of it.
This plays in our life.
Yeah.
At least for me, and I'm not speaking for you, but
you know it does for what I do for a living. Yeah.
You know, and you know, you got to be able to comprehend and contact.
Yeah. And we could touch bases on that for what I do, because when somebody hands you a contract or somebody hands you a rider, and you don't understand what they're asking for or how to execute it, that's where you're going to have a problem. So that's where education, even though it's a flawed system, it's we could talk that's the next podcast, the U.S. education system. But we have what we have, and you still have to know what you know.
But hip hop grew out of that.
Yeah.
In a sense that we got to express ourselves. So we...
Dr. Dre, 1988.
We going along and we listening to, Melly Mel telling us
the message.
And, Run DMC's Hard Times.
Yeah.
Spread like the flu. You coming through this, and then you hit a Boogie Down Productions.
Absolutely.
In Chicago, I can remember, with this college radio station WHBK.
Oh yeah.
Playing these records. And it's like a new thing. It's like,
man.
How did y'all get did you listen to HBK in the Gardens?
Absolutely. And the bad part, I listened. Go ahead, finish.
No, how did you get it?
I got it by putting an extension on my antenna.
Okay.
Because back then the radio frequency, because it was a college-based radio station, it wasn't as strong as a commercial radio station like a GCI or back then like a BMX. So we would get that even with KKC, even with Chicago State's radio station, because they were bound by how strong
like
their signal was.
Watts, 90 watts.
Right. So I absolutely got HBK, and it was like, okay, that's I'm digging that, because you go to KKC for your house fix, you go to HBK for your hip hop fix,
right?
And if I'm not mistaken, it both had existences on Fridays and Saturdays. It was KKC had their house. I forgot what the program was, but Friday night audio on KKC. So you get that, and you can bounce between the two. But it was Saturday for me.
Okay.
For the hip hop on HBK.
Yeah.
Both, but I ain't gonna lie, because back then house music ruled me. It was more of the house music, so I'm recording that. And again, going up to the higher band radio stations, BMXs at that time, and GCI. So you put your tapes in and you record all of that.
Oh man, the cassette tape.
Man.
We all over the place, but it all ties in.
Oh yeah,
because the cassette tape of a BMX mix, a Farley mix, or Kenny Jam and Jason, or Ralph, those hot mix fly. And then on KKC, you had Walter Get Down Brown, his brother Thaddeus Slabback Brown,
Brian Furious Frazier. Wait. Wasn't Pink House on KKC?
Yeah, but he wasn't. He was like a hosting show, but I'm talking about the house DJ.
Okay, the house DJ, right?
Because I don't think Pink House.
You mentioned Walk to Get Down Brown, right?
Because he was the number one.
Yeah.
On like Friday or Saturday, Friday night.
Friday, yeah.
You had Walter Get Down Brown, and he had and eventually brought his brother. You say Brian Frazier.
Brian Furious Frazier.
Somebody else, and these cats were raw.
Man.
I can't even, because they played the music in a way that you heard it in the neighborhood.
Look, they played music that I still can't find to this day. There's a song. Now, Google is one of the greatest human inventions on the planet. You can Google anything and find it. There's a song called, I thought it was called Grant. I don't know, but I thought that was the name of it. I can't find it because when I Google the name Grant and I Google the lyrics from it, I can't find it. But the song was one of those raunchy songs. The guy was going, I'm the one. Wait, how it go? The key that fits the lock. I can't. I had the lyrics in my head.
Okay.
You make me want to doom 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 doom. It was basically it was a guy telling you he was strong at sex.
Okay.
The key that turns the light. That phrase I remember that. But I cannot find it. They used to play that, and I used to remember it being called Grant. I don't know if that was the artist or if that was the name of the song, but it was a house song. And bro, that song I can't find to today. That's the only song. We got to find that.
Because I remember that. That song. And
but again, that was one of those songs that branched between hip hop and house music, because he was rapping to house music about some raunchiness.
Right.
So it was like,
but there was that threshold.
Yeah. Well, let's call it a link.
The link.
Yeah.
The link. And we forget these things, you know. And as we get older, sometimes we forget how interconnected things are, how interconnected people are.
Oh yeah.
And as we talking about these people, a documenting off Chud, who went by another name early on.
Yeah.
A Pooh. You
got Wolfie, you got Moon. I'll give you some more. You got TMC, you got Squirt from the Alligator Squadron, Concrete Mob, my guys. Man, you got.
We'll talk about them too, cause it's a connection.
Oh yeah, man. You got, like I say, you got Rod Tucker, you got the 12 gauge Ruthless Robin, the 12 gauge posse. You got Force of a Gun. I'm finna hit you with one that you probably didn't know. Force of a Gun. That's where Big Nasty come from.
My man, Big Nasty.
The Chud Camp you had, and I'm talking about people from the Garden. So if I don't mention you now, I'm mentioning people from the Garden since we on the Garden. You had Chud, you had Janetta, you had my man Mastermind, who went by Storm, who's Chief. My bad, Chef Ike. Okay. You had Fader. Right. You had Sindel. I mean, you had my man from the Gov. Another, like you say, another extension. You got my man Canisto Pterodon. You got Charles Jackson. He from the Gardens, and he group called the Gov off 103rd. Man, it's like the Garden, like you said. I can go back. Look, let me go back even further.
We got
class of '83 from Carberry High School. No, I thought you was gonna chime in. That was actually, I think they get credit for having one of the first. I know for a fact they were the first high school class that recorded a rap song.
Exactly.
Get Down 83, Get Live 83, Get Live. They had a whole album.
And that was everywhere for a minute. Right?
Yeah, that album was beating up the streets. Big ups to the class of '83 for that album. Mr. Harris, who I think he executive produced that joint. It's like that. Going back to the roots of some of the roots of hip hop in Chicago.
Because a lot of those band teachers were actually musicians who played in bands and were
Mr. Curtis, right? He played with the legendary Isaac Hayes.
And I'm wearing an Isaac Hayes shirt.
Isaac Hayes. Goodness gracious. Good. Oh man, Pusher Man. Why can't I? Let me mention this. What do you call it? A commercial. Can I mention that?
Yeah.
We're toasting, so we're enjoying libation. So if my words don't actually formulate into something solid, chalk it up to my heart and chalk it up to that bottle of whiskey. But not only Isaac Hayes, but Curtis Mayfield. Johnny Pate gets credit on the Superfly album. If you watch Superfly, you'll see that name flash by you. So,
and he's from the Gardens.
And like I say, Mr. Harris, who, man, when I was in high school, he brought, some of the biggest stars at the time. Roger, Zapp. He brought, what's his name? You got to forgive me for not remembering names. I'm always good with names sometimes. Albie Shore, Shirley Murdoch. He was bringing them through, and it was like that was part. Carver, for what it was an entertainment art school.
Okay.
And people don't realize that it had a strong vocational program, but it was also a performing arts school. So that's where a lot of the cats get that from. The producers that came from there, the MCs that came from there, the engineers that came from there, got that start at Carver.
Because we forget that a lot of the people who was teaching us
They were in the industry.
With the industry, they had dreams, they had aspirations. And Chicago, and people forget that Chicago is a musical town.
Man.
Chicago had a lot of labels. They had a lot of blues history.
22nd in Michigan. Back in the 50s and 60s. That's what a record industry was. For those that don't know, that's what the music industry was before it moved to LA and moved to New York.
But ironically, that's where a lot of those house clubs popped up at.
Absolutely.
So that whole area is steeped in music.
Absolutely.
And we don't make those connections sometimes.
Right.
Because, you got Carver sitting out here on the edge of Chicago, basically. And anchoring this whole thing.
Yep.
The Gardens is sitting there anchoring this whole thing. Music pushed north, and it resided there for a minute. But on the south side of Chicago it was
a lot going on. A lot of clubs. A lot of just, they call them hole in the walls, but they were havens for good music. You had the Red Pepper just comes to mind right there on 87th Street. You had the Checkerboard, or was it the Chessboard? Checkerboard. I think it was the Checkerboard right there in Hyde Park. And that was an extension of Chess Records off 22nd Street. Blues Heaven is still right there. And that's the old Chess Records recording studio. Again, we went over some of the names. The South Side of Chicago had a few spots that you could walk into and you could enjoy. The South Side or the Hundreds warehouse right there on 103rd.
Okay.
If you want to get your fix for hip hop, you go in there.
Okay.
So it was. The South Side had a lot of just spots that you can go to and enjoy some music. Going into the South suburbs of Dalton before it became a church, the Dalton. What was it called? The convention center.
Man.
Yeah.
This is history. This is absolute history. And we, like I say, all this is connected because, as we got older, we started branching out a little more outside and exploring the neighborhoods.
Yes.
And stuff. And going to high school. People might have been in the neighborhood, but they went to different high schools. And going to high school, freshman and listening to this music, and then going, into other interests, but that music was still in the back. Right?
Yes, indeed.
You went into Carver, right?
Yes.
And did you immediately take the DJ with you or the music with you, or did you go into sports?
Well, we can fast forward because Carver, my 4 years at Carver was filled with sports. I did nothing in terms of entertainment or music. But on the other side of it, I kept I'm going to use the word lust for DJing. I always gravitated to the DJ, even like homecoming.
Right.
I would go up there with the DJ and I would ask to get on the tables for DJ. So like 3 of the 4 homecomings, I was, I would get a chance to blend a little record or something. So it was always for me to DJ. But Carver had one of the dopest, and I think it was noted that Carver had one of the dopest talent shows.
Okay.
In the city of Chicago. That talent show breeded, some good talent. So that was a catalyst for a lot of what was going on back then also.
Yeah. But also in that era, they had those marching bands too, didn't they? Man,
Carver, and let me go to Mr. Prince. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I know that he has an avenue to Tennessee State. Not sure if he went to Tennessee State. I didn't play in the band, but I know a lot of his greatest students went to Tennessee State. Okay. Carver had probably, when I was there, we didn't have a great football team. Shout out to my teammates. We smashed heads, though. We had one of the greatest defenses. But that band, that always had us going. Those little, playing in the stands. So that band, Curtis Price, shout out to Curtis Price, Dr. Curtis Price, I'm sorry. Yeah. He had that band prepared, and they were doing their thing. Carver had, I think, rated probably in my 4 years up there, they were ranked at the top in terms of marching bands. So shout out to all my band cats up there.
Definitely. That's what I said, that music, though.
Oh, and the crazy part, it still ties into music. So even though I wasn't doing anything musically, I was still around the music. So that was always a good thing and a blessing for me.
So my thing is this, is that, you know, you on that field, but that music is
absolutely
boom, 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 boom.
Simeon, y'all mighty quiet over there. Boom, boom. Simeon, y'all mighty. Man, it just the song, all of that drum line, man.
The drum. And so that, like, what I'm trying to get at is that drum, that music that does something to the soul.
Well, me and you are kindred souls, so we know what the drums mean, going all the way back to Africa. So the drum beat, man, that djembe, they don't use djembes in marching bands, but that djembe is that bass drum. It's that snare drum. It's a combination of it. The same way that djembe, you know, put us in line, our ancestors back in line in Africa, is the same way that drum line put us in line on the football field. It just did something to your soul. It just that drum. The drum's just something for anybody that is a descendant from the continent of Africa, whatever nation you were part of. That drum was just something to you.
And that beat, it hit that body and it,
man,
the heart and then the mind.
Absolutely. Ironically, and it's a twist, and I like doing twists. That's what the government. I'm sorry. That's what the people were using in that concentration camp in I gotta screw my words down in what's that island down there, Cuba? Those subsonic bass. Right. They were using that as torture beat.
Guantanamo Bay.
Right, Guantanamo Bay. I'm sorry, it's the Jameson that is not allowing me to be on pace. but yeah,
we're here.
It's that drum. It's the boom. It's that low, that sub 80 for some who understand audio. That sub 80, sub 40, sub 20, low frequency that just.
It does something.
Yeah,
it does something.
It just does something to you.
And that's what kind of, you know, because when the 808s came in,
man,
you know, that James Brown rhythm came into hip hop.
Man,
you know, oh man, we could go on. You know,
people didn't start moving. A song could come on, or DJ could blend that song, but until that bass hit. Yeah. That's when that's when that it hits you differently.
Drum in our music. You know, I was like, no, I want that thump. No. He's like, no, it ain't in the. He said it's in the bass.
No, you want to know something funny? If you look at any movie from probably any movie, any TV show from 1965 all the way up to like 95. There's a bass riff that's in almost every black urban movie. That boom, down.
Yeah.
It's there everywhere. And it's crazy because sometimes I have to sit back and be like, is that how y'all identify black people? Why that bass riff? But then again, I'm cool with it because that's a signature for us.
Right.
But it's like that boom, down, down.
But it's there and it conveys a lot.
Absolutely.
And it's hip hop music. You know, it captured that.
Yes.
You know, so now we in that era of 87, you know, going to college.
Well, no, not for me. I didn't get to college in 90.
Well, I mean, people started going in that era, they started going 87, 88.
That school day, that school days vibe.
Yeah, you know, and so we leading up to that, but that music is there. Because now it's taking over house music in a sense.
Yeah.
And it becomes the new dance music. It becomes the new
87 Rob bass.
You know,
It Takes Two.
It Takes Two, but it was that. That was that. It Takes Two. Ooh, that's that house.
Yeah.
That's that house in there.
But that was going back, piggybacking on what you're saying. That was the transition right there.
Yeah, and people and the visuals, because we started getting visuals now. A lot more visuals of, you know, people and the dancing and how we should present ourselves.
Right.
You know, but what drew you more and more into, at that point, what was the MCing or the DJing at that point?
It was...
Or all of it?
It was. I would say it was all of it because the DJing was available to me almost at any time. If I could get with any of the homies who had DJ equipment. Mm-hmm. The rapping part of it, the MC part of it was now you know what? Now that I talked it out. The MCing part was more available because all that took was a couple of the homies just standing around. Like I said, the Green Machine, the Barrels, you know, the Rocket, and people listening to this from the guards, they understand what I'm talking about. All it took was a few of the cats just getting around and just kicking back and just doing something. And mind you, we doing this without music.
Okay.
we just spitting, or somebody is beatboxing, or somebody is tapping on a table or tapping on a wall or got a stick or something, creating that rhythm tempo beat. But for the most part, it's without music. So you following the tempo. So I just had to correct myself. So it was more of the MCing, even though I never really, again, it was more like something that I did.
Okay.
I never, until after college, and we'll touch bases on that. At no point did I think that, okay, I'm going to get signed to a record label. Somebody going to recognize my talent. I'm just doing this because it was something that was available and I didn't have to spend money on it.
So leaving high school, going into college, though,
right?
What was that experience?
That experience was, my man, and this is my second year of college, my man, D Fresh, Henry Dickens. Man, that's my guy. Hope he gets it, here on this. That he became what Johnny Banks was for me. Okay. Me and him, we filmed, Coca-Cola was doing something with David Letterman, and we filmed a spot. It was, you do the, you rapping and you incorporate Coca-Cola. So we did this dope rap. It was short. Okay. But it was dope as hell. It was better than anybody else's. But they was like, well, it's too short. Well, we can expand it. But no, don't worry about it. And that was one of the first hating on a brother situation that I had, because me and him, we turned out something dope. And that was something that went national, but they didn't let us go national with it.
Oh, man.
But that was the thing in college. It was that, but it was still DJing. My man Ice, whitest person on the planet if you look at him. But his soul was so urban and brother and African and black. This dude, he was the campus DJ. Okay. This dude, if you listen to his music, and music doesn't dictate what your ethnicity is. But right. He was a brother. I don't care what his ethnicity was. He was a brother. So he let me do my DJ thing. Okay. So it was like, I'm on Canada, and that was part of that thing. So that's how I branched into it. We would do parties, and that was wait, you want me to hold up?
No, go ahead. So I was going to ask you that. How did you get into doing parties?
That's how it was right there. On the campus of Blackburn College down in Carlinville, Illinois. That was where I did my, if I'm not mistaken, that's where we did the first parties. My introduction to being a party promoter was then. Okay. We started off by doing birthday parties, end of semester parties, if we just wanted to party. Because that's what college was. If you were smart about it, you turned everything into a party, but you at the same time, you got to grind and get your grades right. So that was my introduction into party promoting then. And it's funny because that's where, when people ask me how did I get to where I am now, that was the foundation right there.
Starting off as party promoting in the college town.
Exactly.
Okay. Because, you going to the parties beforehand in the city of Chicago, and then you go down to school. It's like, okay, let me bring.
Right. We took it with us. We knew what the template was. Okay. We knew how. And again, it was something easy. Take a room, get a DJ, and play some music. And you tell people what you're doing, where you're doing it, when you're doing it. And they show up and they enjoy themselves. That's how, on a college camp, that's how easy it was.
He just gave y'all the formula.
That's the formula right there. If you ever want to be successful, you get a location, you get a DJ, and you let people know where you're doing it, when you're doing it. And boom.
So you doing this down in Carbondale, right?
Carlinville.
Yep. Excuse me, Carlinville. And then you coming back here and you linking up with other people.
Well, that happened. Well, that's after college. That's after graduation. So 1993, 94, I'm back up here and I start my career as a property manager with the Chicago Housing Authority.
Okay.
So, I'm doing that. But at the same time,
you got a degree in
all business. Yep.
This is important, people. You see, you could do all this and still
and get an education. Whether you use it or not, it's a stepping stone. Use it as a stepping stone, people.
So you come back and
I'm working, and so let's follow the timeline. So let's take it to 1994, and me and some of my college buddies, it was a spot downtown. I can't remember the name of it, but it was in, I want to say it was the Hyatt Hotel. They had an upstairs and downtown. Upstairs and a downstairs spot. Okay. And we used to go there. So we link up and we go parties and we do that. And, I'm thinking, okay, we can get together and do that. It never happened. It never happened. But that, I mean, still, I had that thought. Idea. So let's go forward. So, you know, me and some of my neighborhood buddies, you know, we link up. We all work. So we enjoying ourselves on the weekend. Shout out to Sam Chapman and my man Big Ty. What's poppin'? What's poppin'? If y'all don't know, that was like one of the greatest hood club. I'm gonna call it a hood club because it was in the middle of the hood. So they were what was that? 76 in Halsted. Okay. Great spot. Yes, I mean, no issues in the middle of the hood. Like
yes,
I'm saying.
Indeed. You know, Halsted.
Exactly. So we would, you know, we party up there. So on the chance that I saw and I used to communicate with my man Fader. Big shout to Fader. He's still doing his thing. Yes, but I ran into him one time because he knew I was still doing my little freestyle stuff. Okay. So, you know, he's like, man, and I'm gonna use his name because we don't use his name no more. But he's like, yeah, Harold, you know, he bought his house and he gonna put a studio in the crib. I was like, word. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get up with him. So, you know, like maybe a year go by, maybe 2 years, because I know we relinked. It had to be like 96, 97. Okay. So finally I see him, and the reason why I mentioned what's popping is because I see him and I see Storm, Mastermind, Chef Ike, and what's popping. He over there partying, I'm over here partying. You know, when they get ready to leave, I run up on them. Hey, man, blah, blah, blah. Oh, man, because we hadn't seen, up until that point, I probably hadn't seen him since, man, maybe like 89, 90. He and my sister graduated from Catholic school together in 88. We went to Carver, so I didn't see him from the time I graduated, like 90, till maybe that time that I saw him. Or if I saw him, it was just, you know, in quick passing. Okay. But I saw him up there. And, you know, I told him, man, I saw Fader, and, you know, he mentioned, man, you got studios. Like, man, you come through. So, of course, that next weekend, I go through. And that helped change my life right there, because it was like, okay, one of the homies, he got a studio. I mean, at the time, you've been there. A straight up recording studio, DJ set up, everything in the basement. So it was like, okay.
And that was rare.
That was very rare, because he had a vision and he saw it through. Because I even when we were younger, because he was in the music programs, I remember that was something he wanted to do. He was DJing. And God rest her soul, his big sister Tasha. She, man, when you talk about female DJs, when you talk about female DJs, man, I'm telling you, I don't know if because he was DJing back then. I know he wanted to back then, but his sister, when you talk about the late 80s, she was doing her thing.
Really?
We had house parties out in the gardens. She would be turning can I cuss?
Yeah.
She would be turning the fuck up. I mean, it was like,
know this.
Man, ask him. Ask him. His sister Tasha, again, God rest her soul, man. She was one of the dopest. I would say, I mean, you got Sundance out there doing her thing. You got DJ Alicia. You got all these people, you know, all these females that came after that. But Tasha, I would still say, going back to the 80s, early 90s, was the coldest female DJ I had ever seen in my life. She was doing stuff.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yes.
And so, you don't know if he learned from her or she learned from him?
Well, she definitely didn't learn from him. I'm going to say that. Because mind you, she's doing her thing in the late 80s. She's doing her thing in the mid to late 80s. She's older than him. Right. She's old. Tasha was a couple of years older than me. So she was doing her thing. And I mean, it's like she holding down parties. And you never had the luxury of being at an Altgeld Gardens party.
No, I haven't.
DJs that held it down, you had a respect that nobody else would get in the gardens. I mean, the garden DJs, and I'm going to branch off and I'm going to take it back. Sprucey, he did a house, again, 88. He did a house party for us, for one of the homies. We was on 103rd and Prairie. We couldn't find a DJ. I didn't have any records. We had the DJ equipment. I ain't had no records. We had a few records, so I'm playing like slow music. I'm playing Prince. And I remember my homie Yo-Yo getting me, man, Purple Rain, that ain't a love song. That's a sad song. Okay, I made it through that, but I ain't had nothing to play. I just knew people would love to dance off some slow music. It's females, it's guys. Let's do that. So they went and got Sprucey. Sprucey came with his records. Sprucey turned the fuck out of that damn party. He played a song. I can't even, goodness gracious, I Want to Be With You When the Disco Night Is Over. The very first time I ever heard that song, and that song did something to my soul. Mind you, we still in the house. We still in that branch stage of house and hip hop, bro. The DJs had they could put a voodoo effect on you because of the music, man. You get into that vibe and you just go nuts. Yeah. So, man, but that's that part of it. Yeah. But let's take it back to '97. I get up with my man Chud, and I think like that same week or 2 weeks later, because he was doing the parties at 1900 South Michigan at Foxes and Hounds. Yes. So I fall through, and thing was dope. It's just like, it's just straight dope. I mean, as an artist, and he was an artist. Yes. And he taught me if nobody gives you a platform, create your own platform. So if nobody's going to invite you to hit their stage, get your own stage and you do your own thing. Okay. So from that part, it was like the respect level just went up because it just made sense. If don't nobody want to give you a ride, if nobody wants to give you, and that's the whole operable word, give you anything, you go out and you either take it or you create it for yourself. And that's what he did with those Planet Chub parties. Okay. So I remember going to my first one and seeing the cast perform, but I told him, I do a little stuff. So he had me come to the studio. Okay. And again, I don't write. So just spit a little freestyle. And it was like, it wasn't the greatest thing, but it was like, okay, he understood I had a little something. Yeah. So of course, we go and re-record something. The very first song I recorded was All We Do. It was a sample of Stevie Wonder, All I Do. So okay. That was one of the first joints. That was actually my first song that I recorded. Okay. And I remember Extreme, producer Extreme. He was when we recorded it. When we recorded it, I laced mine just one take. I mean, I think everybody did that, but that was the very first time I was in the studio. Okay. That was the very first time I ever recorded anything. Well, not the first time, but in a studio outside the Chud Studios. That was the very first time. So it was like I did it in one take, and it was like he was mesmerized by it. I was like, I thought that's how it's supposed to go. I didn't know you give a million fuck ups and you could go in and you could do punches and edits and get it back right. So I didn't know that. So that was that first take on that. And then that's how I branched back into doing the promotion side of it to, the parties that he was doing down at 1900 South Michigan, the parties that was going on at the U.S. Beer Club. The U.S. Beer Club. Okay. And I tell you this is why I branched into that. Now, I was just about to say his name. Goodness gracious. No, that's my fault. It's the guy who was doing audio. Because shout out to Victor Harris and Total Eclipse Sound. And I'm gonna tell you about that. But I think his name was Arrow. That's the cat who did the audio for the U.S. Beer Company stuff. Okay. Because we were using Victor Harris and Total Eclipse Sound at 1900 South Michigan. Okay. So to ask the question how I branched from doing the recorded artist thing into doing what I do now is that Vic used to do primarily all of the audio stuff at Foxes and Hounds. Okay. So eventually I developed a rapport with him, and I would hang out at the events or the gigs that he was doing. Okay. And it's just good nature. I go by, bam, just see what they doing, all of that. So that went on for a little bit. Then eventually it got to the point where I had an intrigue. So I started wrapping cables. I started moving stuff. No cost to anybody. It's just something that I just started doing as a what do you call it? To earn my keep for being around, for being invited to hanging around at these things. So eventually it branched from me doing that just freely to being asked because of labor shortage to say, hey man, can you come and do this? Man, no problem. I come through there and do that. So I did that for a while, and eventually got to the point where I became a fixture on this cruise. So I had to I was dancing between having a full-time job as a property manager during the day and being on these gigs at night. Okay. So that went on. So it went from just being we call it guerrilla labor, where you just lifting speakers, moving speakers, loading trucks, unloading trucks, to eventually I get to the point where I'm like, okay, what's that? Oh, that's a mixing console. Okay, what's that? That's a compressor. What's that? It's an effects rack. What's that? It's it's an amplifier. Okay. So I started gradually learning what the dynamics are, signal routing, understanding what the channel strips are on a mixer, to the point where I become, I sit behind a console and I'm starting mixing. Okay. Very first 01V. It's a digital console by Yamaha. It was like a 16 channel. That was one of the first, consoles that I learned on.
Okay.
And, you know, and then you gravitate from doing that to getting to some of the other bigger consoles and finally, you know, understanding the dynamics of audio.
Yeah.
So that was my transition. But that was still, and let me go back to Chud. It stemmed from a conversation that he and I had. And I don't know if it was a general conversation. I don't know if it was me just being around him saying that. But I remember a conversation where he was talking about basically not settling on doing one thing.
Okay.
And the one thing is being a rapper. So if you're gonna be a rapper, be a producer. If you're gonna be a producer, be an engineer. If you're gonna be an engineer, you know, it's always not settling for being just one element in something. And I took that to heart and I said, okay, I can branch out and I can do some of this other stuff. And that's when I started producing. I still got my ASR Pro. Ooh. I got the red one. I still got it. It's in my garage. I still got it. I was turning out some stuff.
Okay. And
so, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, so those inspirational words stuck with you.
Absolutely, to this day. And those are words that I impart on anybody now, because if your only dynamic is one thing, you're useless.
Yeah.
You term yourself useless because I can always find somebody to do one thing. It's harder to find somebody that can do two things, three things, four things. The more dynamic you are, the more valuable you are to people.
Exactly.